Hello coaches and welcome to this edition of Give and Go Live. My name's David Newberry. I'm the e-learning coordinator for United Soccer Coaches and I'm joined by my colleague Ian Barker, Director of Coaching Education. Hello Ian.
Hi David, hi Rory, pleasure to be here.
And today's guest is Rory Lynch. Rory is the Director of Coaching for Cheshire Youth Soccer Club and also the assistant with Fairleigh Dickinson University, a D3 school in New Jersey. And he's also a UEFA B license and a recent recipient of the Premier Diploma for United Soccer Coaches. Hello, Rory.
David, how are you, Ian? Thanks to be here.
So, Rory, today's session is looking at passing sequence to goal. And this occurs on the in half of the field. And as we can see on this initial diagram, we have three players that are making a triangle and a passing combination before the ball is going to be played forward. So would you like to tell us a little bit about what you see here in the setup?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just setting up. We obviously we have our 11, our 9, our 7, our front three, and then we've got our 10 and our 8. So the original focus is just creating triangles and little 10 to 15 yard passing sequence. So our 8 plays into our 7, who's checking towards the ball, open body shape, and knocks it back to our 10. Our 10 lays it into our 8, and then from there, as we'll see, we go on. It's this little combination play that triggers our movement and allows us to advance further down the field.
So let's talk about methodology. Pretty critical part of any coaching performance is methodology. So tell us what you see here and the types of methods you'll bring in to make this activity more or less challenging.
Yeah, so obviously our little link up in the corner, the level and the ability of the players. So if they're a lower level, you know, it might take a couple more touches and it might be more static to begin with. But as we go up, if the level's higher, the age is higher, players should be checking in and receiving on the move. Ideally, it should be 1-2 touch maximum, and that'll sort of initiate the speed of play, and that'll sort of dictate the tempo of the exercise as it goes on.
And Ian, what's your thoughts on the methods of an activity like this?
Well, once again, I quite like some pattern establishment without too much pressure. But in this case, the mannequins, they could be trash bins or whatever, they give you some relevance because they determine, in this case, where the offside line would be. So just these little visual helps, and in the previous Give and Go, we looked at boxes and cones and markers, but I really like the use of mannequins here. And then, of course, coaches, you know, Rory clearly likes to play with a central striker, number 9, a wide right and a wide left, 7-11 respectively. But you may play with 2 strikers, or you may play with a different configuration of your midfield. So these types of setups are to be adapted by the coach for his or her environment. You don't have to necessarily copy the way that Rory does it with his club and his university.
Let's go to the second sequence. Here, Rory, we've we've just had the pattern. The ball was being passed back to the number 8, and the 2 players involved, the 10 and the 7, have now moved as they've passed their ball into new positions. And as we can see here now, the number 8 has made a sublime bent pass around the mannequin into the path of the number 7.
Yeah, so the idea of the previous slide was obviously the 7 was checking in, and because of his body shape, it wasn't realistic for him to then get down the channels. So he just played through his face and knocked it into the number 10, who linked back up with the 8. Because of this, obviously, the defenders would hopefully react to the ball, which allows us then for the 7 to spin away and the 8 to play that ball down. Obviously, depending on his movement or where the ball received, it might be a little slip pass in between the center half and the fullback, and that's completely fine. You know, you play the images in front of you, and then from there, again, that's our trigger. We've now broken the line, the offside line, by the ball being down into this position here, and that's allowed our 11 to get in back post, our 10 to make this overlapping run to sort of bring players with them, and our 9 to play a little bit more direct. And now we've got 3 different players making 3 varied runs into the box for our 7 to get his head up and look for it.
Okay, and you just mentioned here that the ball could have been passed on the outside of the defender, depending on where the space is, or certainly through the seam between the 2 defenders, the left back and the central defenders. What other things do you see on this diagram that will help the coaches from a methodological perspective?
Yeah, so the big thing I would touch on here is obviously the quality of the pass from the number 8. It needs to be weighted that it'll arrive at the same time. What we're not looking for, and what tends to happen sometimes, is as the number 7 makes that run, we try and play to his feet. But if we play to his feet here, we haven't broken a line of pressure. We force him to then beat a player 1v1 as this fullback will come out to him. But instead, if the quality of the pass is both, timed, weight, and accuracy to get in behind, then that allows the 7 to approach it first time and allow him to almost play a one-time cross if the quality of the ball is good. And then, of course, the movement of the players, what we don't want is straight line runs to straight line balls and putting ourselves at the risk of going into offside position. So it's those timed, angled runs that are going to be key to get themselves into the box.
And Ian, the players that are directly involved in this activity, the 8, the 7, and the 10, it's quite easy to engage them. But here we have the 11 who's out on the left-hand side. We have the striker. Obviously, very important that these players are alert, attentive as the activity is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Rory's done a great job for equipment companies all around America with the use of the mannequins and the cones. But what these mannequins and cones, again, what they really help the players with, if you look at the white lines coming off of the players' movements, it helps them with the timing of their runs and the shape of their runs to elude defenders and meet the cross and still be onside. So these cones and mannequins serve a really great purpose. At some point, when you remove them, the players now have to do this without those visual prompts. But I would just say that you still have the visual prompt of the goalpost. You have the visual prompt of the edge of the 6-yard box, maybe the penalty spot, and of course the 18. So as the players get more sophisticated and you lift out some of the markers and things you're using to help yourself and help the players, there's still places where they can make a visual reference as to where their movement is and where they are on the field.
Excellent points. And then finally, the final sequence here, Rory, we've ended up with a nice cross and a finish by the number 10.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is key, obviously, from our number 7. He's a right-footed here. So one of the things that I would touch on with my 3 players in the box is being able to judge which way the ball is coming. So from a right footer coming in this way, it's going to be curling away from goal. Therefore, the player should not be making the same run on the same line. My front post, who's my number 9 here, should be getting ahead of the ball. My number 10 should be taking his position up off the number 9's move, so he should be slightly staggered behind him. So if that ball was to curl away or beat the number 9, then it would come into him. And then the number 11, again, would take his position off the number 10 in case it came over the top or it was flighted and sort of missed them or got drilled across or is looking for any balls to come out the back post. So again, it's those sort of details when we get to this level. Once we go to 11v11, and also the ability of your players being able to read the flight of the ball and the cross of the ball, depending on which foot the player is going to be taking to cross it in.
And Ian, on this last diagram, we see one of the challenges of using mannequins. That is, now they are obviously out of position, and we got 4 players essentially unopposed. So, how would you introduce defenders in here? Would you introduce them all 4 at the same time? Would you replace one mannequin at a time? How would you do that?
That's a good question. So what I'd probably do is I'd probably make these 2 players live to start with so that they could recover back in and defend the cross. That's to say, mark up the 2 strikers. Alternatively, I might have 1 live here and then 1 live here, putting a little bit of pressure on the cross. So now there's some pressure here and there's at least 1 player trying to split these 2 strikers as they move in. So it is critical that at some point we layer in those defenders. So what you might do is you might have either your defenders just waiting on deck to employ, or you might have them over with an assistant coach doing something else. And then if you've got enough players, you probably have another 11, another 7, and another 9 and 10 ready to go. So you can keep waves of this activity coming if you've got, a squad of 15, 16 players.
And Rory, on this diagram here, we have the number 7 who is, could essentially just jog into position. Would you put any restrictions or modifications here for the 7 when they are in receipt of the ball to make sure it's game realistic?
Yeah, so obviously we touched on our number 8 playing, the ball down in behind, and I would look to, if the 3 players getting in the box, their movement off the ball is good enough, then we should be hoping for, a first-time cross, or else his instructions will be to get to the byline. So if he picks it up and players aren't in a position yet, then we'd be instructing to get to the byline, and then can he provide a cutback? So it's a different type of cross, and your approach, you're coming onto the ball as opposed to trying to strike a ball that's coming across your run. From there then as well, we've touched on adding in active defenders. So whether it's 2 or even all 4, you can add counter goals at the halfway line. This can be the start of a sequence, But then depending on what the outcome was, if it's not a goal or if it's saved, we can then introduce again transition by having the counter goals up at the halfway line that the goalkeeper can then play out to the active defenders, and we get a bit more of a transitional phase and a game sequence going, with our start point being this passing sequence.
That's excellent modification, and certainly brings us into what is much more game realistic eventually. So just to summarize, we started off with a 3 passing sequence with the number 8 initiating and then receiving the final pass. The number 7 and number 10 move into advanced positions, and the 8 looks to play wide, so the 7 either inside of the mannequin or on the outside, and then the players 11, 10, and 9 will make forward runs with the objective of scoring. So thanks very much, coaches, for joining us, and thank you, Rory and Ian, for your contributions in this session of Give and Go Live.